welcome again to our show, The Bright Spot. Again, I'm Fred Smith with Houston Graduate School of Theology, a professor of public theology and the director of the Center for Leadership in Public Theology. And we're here to continue our conversations with Dr. Virgil Woods. Now, last time we talked extensively about the beloved community and the beloved economy.
Right.
And we also talked about the remnants. I want to continue that discussion today, and we're going to even go even deeper today.
Yes,
we're going to
yes.
bring up some of the themes that you talked about last time. We're going to continue it. And I wanted to begin with the definition that I have been using and really been building my concept of the why,
yes,
the
yes.
beloved community,
Yes.
from Josiah Royce, which he was at Harvard, I think it was from 1908 to 1918, and I think it was 1918, I've got to get this right, when he wrote one of his crowning works. You know, he was a philosopher, a idealism or idealistic pragmatist philosopher with William James and Charles First and Cynthia and that group,
Dewey
and all that
Yeah,
group.
yeah.
But he considered himself an idealist, you know, and his focus of his work was on loyalty, you know, and he really identified loyalty with Paul's understanding of love, especially of community love. And so he wrote a book, The Problem with Christianity, which is probably one of his books that most people know him by, other than his work on loyalty, where he was really examining, well, what was the purpose of the church?
Yes,
You know,
yes.
after the Enlightenment, after
Wow.
people didn't believe in miracles anymore.
Right, that's right.
You know, and really his theme was that folks cannot be Christian by creed anymore. It has to be
right.
something more than that.
Yes,
and
yes,
so he
right.
toyed with these pragmatic notions, and he came up with the notion of a universal love ethic.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
which he distilled in the notion of the beloved community. And this is a definition that I picked out of his book. I saw it had a page number on it. But the beloved community is where love and justice rule, a community of justice, a community of unique, distinct individuals who are loved for who they are in the polarity of their circumstances, yet they share a common memory and a common future. It's a community of interpretation where our stories, our context, our future hopes have meaning and inspire hope, and each individual is assured that it's loved. When I was with the Methodist Bishop Initiative on Children in Poverty, we wrote I helped to construct a bishop's epistle called Our Shared Dream, the Beloved Community. And from that, I deduced 5 what I call the social theological hermeneutics, you know, and with 5 principles really of the beloved community.
Yes.
One is a community that's ruled by love and justice. By love, I mean concrete acts of compassion and mercy.
That's right.
And just, I mean right relationships, you know, or righteousness.
Yeah, yeah.
And it could mean right economics as far as that's
so-
concerned, you know.
absolutely, yes.
The second, everybody's worth is affirmed. As you know, Martin Luther King's basic philosophy was personalism
That's right,
and the worth of the
exactly.
human personality,
Right.
you know, creating the image of God. And the third was a diversity enriches all lives through our common memories and our shared future. You know, and that's, you know, it has to do with whether it's history of the country or the nation or just human history.
Right,
that we have a shared memories, but we also share a future together. You know, my friend Gary Guns talked about the future as remembered past.
Yes,
Hope as remembered past,
Yes,
you know.
yes, yes.
But also, our stories inspired hope. Hope comes from Charles Peirce's notion of the community as a community of interpretation. You know, and that whatever our stories are, you know, in a community that's a love community, we can take those stories, whether it's a drug addict or a prostitute
Yes,
or a rich person,
That's
you know,
right, that's
or a
right.
crazy person.
Exactly.
That together we can interpret whatever you are now to hope. You know, that it can inspire hope. And finally, this notion of grace, that we're loved unconditionally and forever. You know, one of my favorite pastors, Woody Rasmus, talk about, we love you and there's nothing you can do about it. But what I want to focus on is the black church. You know, as we mentioned before in the last conversation, you know, it was the black church, or at least black church people.
Yes.
And I've heard Miss Robinson, I think her name, who was a civil rights leader, said that it was really black religion.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that made the difference. But, you know, so we know that the black church historically, role with black people, was built on a brotherhood among all persons to further and to safeguard spiritual, physical, economic, and social well-being of black people. And this was especially important because it was the only viable institution in a racist society bent under supplication and oppression.
Amen.
I mean, that was what it
Yes,
was. But,
yes, it was.
but what about now? What about post-civil rights movement? With the abolition of racial segregation, racial segregation was not an end in itself, but the removal of segregated laws from the books and public spaces was significant only as an action would clearly promote a truly inclusive community, and we know it's not.
That's right.
That
That's
is
right.
not the case.
Yes.
That's because it's easier to remove legal structures than to overcome the social, spiritual forces that causes those structures in the first place.
Right on.
And what we talked about last time, which I think is critical, especially for us as black people,
Yes.
and I think is really the important role that the black church have to do, is that when these structures are removed, what remains is the spiritual brokenness that those structures that have built up in the hearts and the minds of black people for generations. We talk about now 400 years,
That's right.
4 centuries of these racial structures that have been internalized and that are now manifested,
Yes, yes.
you know, in antisocial behaviors and self-destructive behavior. You know, so I like to talk about everything that we've talked about for now. Let's bring it down to today.
Yeah.
You know, especially focusing on the remnant.
That's right.
You know, and that is the black church. You know,
That's great.
and so we want to deal with the issue of internalized oppression, of social racism, but also spiritual dryness. And
Lord have
I didn't
mercy.
mention this before,
Yes.
but I go to churches now, they're live wires, and they can sing and they can preach, you know, but really inside the people are dead.
Amen. Amen.
You know,
Amen.
meaningless
Yes.
ritual. They're
Yes.
well
Yeah,
entertained.
that's right. That's right.
You know, and a brief high, you
That's
know, with
right,
the endorphins
exactly,
flowing,
that's right.
but inside they're still dead. And they go back to the same kinds of drive lie, and that
Exactly.
internalized oppression
Exactly.
still drives them
Yes.
in their behaviors and
Yes.
self-destructive behaviors.
Yes.
So tell me, let's talk about that from your perspective. Why the black church now?
You know, Fred, I have a confession to make. I led the movement in Lynchburg. I was professor at the little black college there, Virginia Seminary College. I had half of his faculty in jail with me, half of the faculty from the white university, and a group of students, right?
Yeah.
Dr. M.C. Allen called me in. He was sitting there looking like Moses with his long hair down on his shoulders, you know. And he says, you Negroes running around here talking about some integration. He said, you're too stupid to know that you're all going to do the entering, the white folks going to do the grading, right? Listen, Fred, I hope I get to heaven to tell him how right he was. We gave up what the initial black church created, institutions. If you look at slavery from 1865 to 1915, they concentrated on building the institutional infrastructure of our survival.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And then from 1955 to 1965, we had the flowering of the leadership out of those original institutions.
Right.
At the same time that we did not do integration, desegregation correctly. It was not our model. We were led into an assimilationist model.
That's right.
And therefore, we have lost our institutions, and the black church is the only one we still have that can recreate the institutional infrastructure by which we can now go from survival to sustainability.
Yeah.
And I think that the black church, somehow we got to figure out, how do you do the autonomy of your own thing while being a part of a bigger picture, rather than being in somebody else's model as a footnote? The black church created the moral authority by which we changed America. And then we allowed other people with other agendas to come into the line, push us to the back of the line, now pushed out of the line. We are not even in our own line that we created. And the black church is the only one who can fix that now. But now we know how to do it in a way. I really believe that we have the key to a kind of togetherness
Yes, go ahead.
where we have, I call it the shepherd's table, the Martin Luther King shepherd's table. At the shepherd's table, I want black preachers and white preachers. I want rabbis. I want imams. Anybody. Let's think about this, Brother Fred. The shepherd's table is a table of the good shepherd. But we're not here to talk theology at the table. When we must talk our theology, go back into your own enclave and settle the theological issues. But at this table, we're going to talk about what is broke in our society that we have to fix. I believe the symbol of that is that we can't keep our children alive anymore. Young, poor kids killing each other. Rich kids killing themselves. It's the same predicament, Brother Fred. We got to fix that. And at this table, we got to figure out, how do we do that? How do we save our children and their families? And my work now is something I call saving every child on planet Earth, right?
Right.
Now, my thesis says, that's why I love the capacity that you all have here. My thesis says that you don't have to do it. You just have to convince a whole lot of people that that's what God wants, and God has already provided all the resources, every resource is necessary. We ought to draw a circle around Houston. Okay, I want to draw a circle around Houston, a 50-mile radius around Houston. And I want us to say, we're going to mobilize everybody within that circle to say, listen, whatever it takes to make sure that not one more child goes to jail, whatever that takes, and from whomever it takes, let's make sure that happens.
That's sort of like the concept in Harlem, isn't it?
The Children's Zone.
Yes.
The Harlem Children's Zone.
The Harlem Children's
That's
Zone.
right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's right. That is the model. And there's so much we can do already to reverse the jail trail and to reverse the predicament, but we think that you got to get the system, which you do have to do that. You got to work on the system, but in the meantime, if you strengthen the people will change the system. The mobilization that we did was the people did it.
Yes.
The people did it.
Exactly.
It was, you know,
Yeah.
Martin wouldn't have had a credibility, a shroud of credibility, if that community had not mobilized itself. And let's what else? Let's be clear. The sisters,
Yes.
the women,
Thank you.
the
Thank you.
women
Yes.
led the way.
Yes.
And we got to figure out how do we honor that. I'd like to mention also, Fred, I've come to the conclusion that our kids, I told you I asked these kids if they think they're smarter than grandmama. And here's where I'm going with that. I want them to know, I think the last hope of reconnecting to our faith, our underlying faith, our spiritual, is to grandma. I think if we turn the world over to grandma for 2 weeks, turn the world over to grandma. So it's got to be what Mary McLeod Bethune called a movement built on prayer. You got the spirituality right, but then you got to get the strategies by which you get it done, the processes, the how of doing it, and we get those into matrimony. I think we'll see a turnaround of our plight, especially the people on the bottom. The black church doesn't care about our people on the bottom, then there's no hope. And somehow I think, Fred, we're going to have to, as I say, I talk until I'm blue in the face, these pastors. I probably know as many pastors in Houston as pastors who've been here all along, because I'm on the outlook for pastors who are trying to get something done in their bailiwick, right? And often they're working with inadequate resources, but they're doing it. Now, suppose we decided that
Well, let's for a minute talk about some of those pastors.
well,
Let's talk about some of those.
here's what I'm saying. They're exemplary pastors in this
Yes,
town.
I
They're
know, yes.
exemplaries. I think Pastor Lawson is one of those who laid the way, if we're going to call names. I think you mentioned Rudy, the work
Right.
that St. John has done. These are exemplary models of what we've got to do. Now, here's the story. I think the way we've got to do it, though, is we've got to, first of all, convene the assembly, right? Organize the assembly so that you got task forces that are researching the different agenda areas,
So
right?
you talk about a pastor, like a pastor's round table, or
Yes, Pastor's Round Table, the
Yes,
Shepherd's
yeah.
Round Table.
Shepherd's round
That's
table.
right. And the pastors have got to convene it. But there's got to be a cohort of people who are interested in education issues, economic issues, culture and service, health, and they got to cook the agenda. We got to have our best minds thinking the stuff through. So once they've cooked the agenda, they bring it back to the assembly. And so the assembly now has an agenda for action, whatever the action is. For
So
example,
you talk about the pastors' roundtable. I mean,
Yes.
the shepherds' roundtable.
yes,
The assembly is who?
the assembly is the totality of the people.
Okay.
Let's say you got all of these task forces that are cooking the agenda, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe you got 40 people in each of those, right?
Okay.
They got to stay in their lane. They got to figure out everything we need. For example, we're about to lose 10 schools in Houston.
Uh-huh.
These schools are being able to thrown under the bus. We can't let that happen. We've got to find a way to save those kids and those schools and their families.
You know, one of the concepts that I've been working with in the faith and health movement we talked about.
Yes, yes.
You know, it's very, you know, it's an overused term now, but it's called collective impact.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And collective impact, you know, is very much how you're describing it. You know, instead of a shepherd's roundtable, they call it a backbone organization. Well, the organization I work with called stakeholders, we call it a trellis. And that is a framework
Yes.
on which to build different movements and different
Right.
strains around,
Exactly.
you know, like I said, education,
Right.
economics,
Right.
health,
Sure.
and so forth,
Right.
that they grow on this organization called a trellis. But the organization the collective impact has an organization at the center that's responsible for communicating with all these different
Right,
segments, because these
exactly.
segments have to be in communication with
That's
one
right.
another.
That's right.
Otherwise, they'll go off on their own way
Exactly,
and
exactly.
recreate the wheel over and over again.
That's right.
And then they have to have a common agenda or
Right.
a common agenda, goals. And so each one of them, and I just worked with a group just not long ago in the Union South OST, each one of them creates what their primary objective and goal is.
That's
They may have a lot of objectives, but what's their primary goal?
Primary goal.
And so you have a goal for education, a goal for economics, a goal for health, a goal for
Exactly.
community.
Right.
And that's the agenda that we all agree that we want to work
Exactly,
on, because we
exactly.
use a systemic approach,
That's
a
right.
systematic approach,
Yeah, exactly.
systemic approach. So we
Excellent.
know that these all work together. They may be individual, but they
Right.
work together in a system.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Systemically,
And
you
they
know.
synergize each
and
other.
and right. The next thing is then, because you have a common agenda and you have a common measurement
Yes,
to know
yes,
when you're
yes.
going to achieve something,
Right.
and then you have to create synergetic activities.
Exactly.
So the folks in education, the folks in
Right.
economics, folks in health,
Right.
folks in the food system,
Right.
they're all working on their specific goals. They do what they do, but they understand that they're part of a larger system,
Exactly.
and they have to coordinate their different
That's right.
activities. That's some of what you're talking
Oh,
about.
absolutely, absolutely. And by virtue of working together on planning, once you've got a master plan, people can look at that and say, "Oh, this is where my part is." They help to plan it; they'll help to make it happen.
That's right.
So the mobilization model is what we're
So
talking
where
about.
are we on that right now?
I think
How do we do this? See, I'm not
Well-
want to talk just abstractly.
No, I said me
Let's,
either.
how do we do this?
That's right, me either. And I told you, I'm on a short, Benjamin May
I
said,
understand.
Benjamin May said, young men may die, old men must die. So, I'm pushing. I'm pushing.
Well, I mean, I know you say you want to do it. You and Martin Luther King, there, in Memphis, at the Church of God of Christ Temple, wherever the temple was,
Right, right.
stood up and said, with the wind blowing and
That's right.
and howling,
The
he said,
that's
and he was worried about dying. He said,
That's
I want
right.
to live a long life,
Yeah.
but
But-
I've been to the
I've been
mountaintop,
up, and I've seen-
seen the other
I've
side.
seen- I've seen
and
the promised
we,
land.
as a people, I may
We-
not get there.
I mean, I get there.
But we as a people will get there together. So brother, no matter how long you have in the life, we as a people are going to get there together. So
But
I don't know. I may have a couple more years than you do. I don't know that.
That's
for
right.
sure.
We don't know. Because
But-
babies die.
That's
Babies
right.
die.
But in any case, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how to take all this tremendous wisdom and experience
Yeah,
and energy you have at
Yeah.
87 years
Yes,
old.
yeah.
The energy, man, I wish I was good at 85.
Well, my friend, it's a 5-minute act.
But
Yeah.
I want to know, I have been working, in this city, not as long as you, for a couple of years now. There's been a lot of pastors, many of
Yeah.
them been on this show, many of those have done a lot of things.
Right.
But how do we organize them? How do we help them not believe that they're, that they are giving up their own turf. I was
That's
watching
right.
the Warriors, and the
Yeah.
Rockets,
Right, right.
play
Oh, yeah.
in the Cleveland. The thing about this, they have 5 All-Stars,
That's right.
really 5 with the Iguodala,
Exactly.
but they all have to give up something
That's right. That's
to
right.
work together as
Exactly.
a team
Yeah,
to
yeah.
win the championship.
That's right. That's
Versus a team with a LeBron James. I mean, the best player in the world could not defeat that team.
That's
Or
right.
the Rockets with Harden and all the
They came close. They came close,
But this team, I mean, I'm from Oakland, so I'm a fan. But that's not the point. They work together.
Did you say from Oakland?
I was born and raised in Oakland, California.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
So,
West Oakland for me. Actually,
Yeah.
Huey Newton and the
Yeah.
Panthers
Oh,
and all that.
sure,
My
yeah.
brother went to Merritt College with them.
Yes,
And so
yes.
they were my neighbors.
Oh, get out.
So that's where I get this stuff from. But how do we? And this is where I want us to continue this conversation.
Yes, yes.
Let's name the Shepherd's Table.
Right, right. That's right. That's right.
Let's organize. I'm a can-do person.
Right, right.
Let's organize. The
Yeah,
group.
make it happen.
This is like I pushed a sermon on Joshua.
Yeah.
14 with Caleb.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
85 years old. He said,
That's right.
He said, I was 40 years old the last time we was at this point. Now we're here again. And the sons of Achan are still up in those mountains.
That's
just like it was 45 years ago. Listen, I'm 85 years old, but I still got my eyesight.
And he
I
said-
still got my strength.
that's right.
Give me this
Give
mountain.
me this mountain. Give me this
So
mountain.
that's what I'm saying. Come on. Give me this mountain.
Give me
Let's
this mountain.
take this mountain right now.
Well, you know what, my friend?
What?
You know what? Why this is so pressing. We are at a place that a lot of people will depend on our success for their success. Appalachia, destroyed by opioids.
Yes.
Now, our people have been through the drug stuff.
Yes.
We've learned how to survive it.
Yes.
So now we can say to them, look, we're gonna share with you what we know.
Let me just tell you.
Yes.
I started my work in 1988 when my nephew got killed selling crack cocaine in Oakland, California, and I headed the Pan Methodist Coalition on alcohol and drug abuse for 4 years to create the Revival Hope curriculum, and then worked for the Carter Center as associate director for substance abuse and violence. For a number of years, worked with SAMHSA and so forth for the drug academic. And that's how I got involved in faith and health.
Wow.
Just this last week, I was in a conference with the McNair Medical Institute. They're the ones who own the Texans, and they are starting an opioid project. Wow. And they're trying, and they got AI, and artificial intelligence and virtual reality and big pharma, and all these things, alternative treatment. But what they said at the basis of it was faith.
Yes, yes.
And hope. I was the only one that wasn't a scientist when there was another one, it was a community patient advocate. There wasn't a scientist in the room. But I
You were the scientist.
I was the only one that was not a scientist as a theologian.
Well, you're a scientist too.
Well, yeah,
You're both.
But yeah.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but
I know what you're saying.
But what I'm trying to say is they learned
Yes.
from my experience
Praise
working
God.
with crack cocaine
Yes.
and working with the
Wow.
drug epidemics that ravaged our communities in the 80s and the 90s and so forth. So what you're saying is absolutely true. And I believe, and I can't speak for the McNair Foundation, but they're Christian people.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
They're solid
I'm
Christian
impressed with
people.
them. I'm impressed with them. I'm impressed
Yeah,
with them.
and so I really believe, that you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That people can learn from
Right.
our experience.
Exactly.
But what I'm talking about now is we're about, is how do we take all this experience, all this knowledge, all this together, in Houston, Texas, with the largest medical center in the world,
Absolutely.
with some of the greatest churches and
Yes.
pastors and
Yes.
ministry in the world are right here. We talked about a few of them just a little while ago. I want us, if we have you back on the show, I want us to develop a plan, and I want us to go ahead. I'm a can-do person. I believe in getting it done.
I got a specific for us.
So you know, so I know you have some stuff going on, and we're almost out of time.
I got a specific for us. I got a specific
Okay.
for us. Okay. I think everybody understands. I think we could start with education while we're cooking these other agenda items, while we're cooking them, right? We got to do something.
Back to education.
So
right.
I talk with, you know who Rod Page is.
Yes, yes.
He's my frat brother too. I talked with him about this idea. I want to buy a KIP eventually.
Okay, I know about KIP, yes.
Yeah, I want to buy a KIP. Now
Yes.
watch this, Doc. There's 2 steps that way. The second step is to do joint venture with KIP, especially in places where they're not operating. Now, I want to develop a national chain of private schools that are owned by the people. It's an employee stock ownership model, right? The educators, administrators, the cooks, janitors own the school, right? But we can start right away by creating an after-school school system. Talking about, Fred, we know how to turn these kids' lives around, right? I want to see us right now work with these kids starting immediately, right? So this kid leaves school on Friday, he's a pain in the butt. He goes to school on Monday morning, he goes to Miss Jones and says, could I say something to the class, Miss Jones, before we get started? I just want to apologize to you and to my classmates. Last week I was an actor, I was a fool in here. But I want you to know I'm here today because I want to learn whatever you want to teach me, Miss Jones.
Let me you know, Richard, KIP schools. There's 2 things I want to say about that. One is something called purpose-built communities. In Atlanta, a place called East Lake, and the Cousins, the builders, the Cousins Foundation, you know, this partner with
That's
KIP.
up near the airport, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure where they're located.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But
right.
East Lake's not near the airport, I don't think.
Okay, all right.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Anyway,
sure.
they partner with the schools, in this case, KIP schools here in Atlanta now. They build housing around it. They also build with the YMCA, you know, to build different programs in it.
Sure,
you know, and with other partners, so that they do exactly what you're talking about. You know, in that they built a whole community around education, and they also partner with a health clinic. So you have a health clinic, you have the YMCA, you have the school, and you have a housing development together called purpose-built communities. Okay, now that exists right now.
Yeah.
We can give.
So this is available to us.
That's available to us right now. There's one out in, I think it's somewhere in north or west Atlanta. I mean, Houston right now. They're here in Houston now, but they're just really getting started. But there's another program, and we're almost out of time, the Children's Defense Fund, the Freedom Schools.
Yeah, I know. I'm working with
you know,
Marion
and so with Marion Wright Element and so forth.
That's right.
And so if we can combine that kind of concept with the Freedom Schools, you know, with after-school programs that you were talking about, and then build housing projects, the economy, recreation, with like the YMCA. You know, Benjamin Mays worked for the YMCA.
Sure.
The YMCA is one of the most progressive organizations in the history.
Exactly.
You know, so YMCA and
they've
so
been
forth.
with us on the front end of
from the whole time.
desegregating America.
We're out of time again.
Okay. Well, we'll